we'll get started here really quick. Shiloh and Emil, if you'd like to turn on your cameras. I know Angela would probably love to see everybody's faces. If for any reason the camera's not working and you're not feeling like that, that's totally okay. I remember when I was in business school, video conference, this was back in 2010, and video conference had been around, had just started, taking off. And I remember when the subject of video conferencing came up, business school students were tasked with doing surveys about how people felt about it. And it was interesting. People that had a real, thank you, Barrett. I remember people had a real reluctance on video conferencing. And it was something that surprised me, but maybe shouldn't have, which was that people didn't want to have to deal with being seen, right? And when you think about it, it sort of makes sense. And I had already been doing a little bit of video conferencing. I was pretty accustomed to it. But this, when polls were done, when surveys were done, this was one of the real frequent things that was reported back in these surveys. I guess, 10 years later with the situation that we're in now, we're gonna have to get over it, at least for a period. The other two little tips that I'll give you while we're waiting for Angela. One, if you can avoid very bright things in the background or white backgrounds, that'll help you a lot. Because the way the cameras work is they essentially have an automatic exposure or an automatic iris. And what happens is when the camera sees that big brightness, it will close down its aperture. And our filmmaking students certainly, our production students certainly understand this. And just got a message from Angela, and her laptop died. And she's going to be logging in shortly. So we're all good. This was actually, sometimes the timing works out in your favor. So bright things in the background, avoid, that's one thing. And again, that eye level, not that we have to worry about that today. This boot camp is part of your working to get more and more adept as one of your professional skills. Now, I saw that I don't think Angela's with us yet, but she will be soon. And you guys you're in for a really great treat this week. Be a little patient with Howard because all this technology is pretty new stuff for him. This is a guy who, he used to go to pitch meetings with his kids, and he would sit them in the corner, and that became part of his shtick, right? He's going to tell you, you need to present yourself in a way that is distinctive, and part of his routine was that he would actually show up to these meetings with his kid, stick him in the corner, go into the executive's office, do his pitch, have his kids charm the heck out of the assistant that greeted them, and then he'd be on across town to the next studio. So let me ask if anybody has any questions at this point. Any questions about the boot camp or me or what this whole thing is all about? I'll field any questions while we wait for Angela. Just unmute and ask away. And for those watching on our YouTube channel, the live stream, which we're really excited to be able to share this with you guys. We've run into a little technical difficulty. Angela Courtin, the head of YouTube Global Brand Marketing, will be joining us any minute, at least according to the text message that I just received. And we look forward to her joining in and you all observing the conversation. But I should also tell you, those watching at YouTube, if you did have a question, we'll be monitoring the comment section. And while most of the questions are going to be fielded by the students here at our Film and TV Career Bootcamp, We can field questions also directly from the live stream. So Barry, if you or Ben could just be checking in on that, and if you see a particularly pertinent question to the subject matter that we're discussing, then by all means, we can field a question or two. All right. You know, I had, oh, hey.
Let me see if I can do this properly. There we go.
Wait, but what you just did is you just went into the iPhone view. You went into vertical.
I know, but I'm on my laptop. I'm not on my laptop because I can't figure out how to make it work. Because I have a Chromebook, which I love Google, but I can't quite figure out how to make it work.
Yeah,
See. But if I turn it this way, but I need to figure out where to look here.
Well, make it work for you. We're happy to see you in whichever aspect ratio or orientation. Now, last I checked, didn't you work for a tech company or something?
By the way, that means that we are the least technical people there are on the planet, because we just call Tech Stop and they make everything work.
Okay, hey, students, everybody, turn off your mics or turn on your microphones, unmute, okay? And give Angela Courtin a big hey, how you doing?
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Man, that's a killer hat you got there, Angela.
By the way, I just came from spending, I just came from spending time with my kids and enjoying the summer. I'm going to try to actually log in to my laptop so that I can get a better view of this.
Okay, cool. Good. Well, it's no problem because my Wi-Fi went down.
Even better, right?
Yeah, it actually worked out beautifully. And just to remind you, Angela, so we are live streaming.
Great.
Your very own YouTube. And so there are not just our 17 or so students here, but there are some folks watching the live stream on YouTube as well.
Lovely.
And then you go ahead and as you're getting your computer set up, I'm going to give a little bit of framing for our conversation.
Fantastic.
Okay. So, so students, I reached out to Angela because we've been friends for a while now. And I find Angela to be a particularly inspiring person. And when I had Angela come and visit my class a couple of times, that feeling of being inspired really became deeply instilled within me, especially last fall when she came to our Welcome to Hollywood class. And I could tell that the students, both live in Santa Monica and our students that were watching via video conference, felt very similarly. And given the times that we're living in right now, you know, there is challenges to keeping spirits high, obviously. Now, okay, good. Now I think what's happening is that Angela is looking on two different cameras now.
I'm back in a much better way.
Okay, that's fabulous. Now we see you, now a little echoing. So let's figure out who needs to mute their mic. Okay, good. All right. So give me a thumbs up if everybody can hear me okay. Okay, good. All right, we're rolling, people. Good. So setup. Why are we here? What are we going to talk about? And why are we going to talk about it? So these are challenging times without any question. And, you know, I'll just lay it out really real. Like I got hit by a cavalcade of nothing too devastating, but just some real challenges in the midst of a global health crisis. But none of them were really that bad. You know, I wasn't deeply touched in a particularly negative way. And I knew that it was important with the students that I was teaching, with everybody that I was communicating with, to keep spirits high, to stay positive. And this was, 8 weeks ago. And that this would be critical to do, and that we needed to take a real long view on this thing, because from what the doctors were saying, that there was no telling how long it would take for a vaccine to be created, for treatment to be taken, and created. And the leading experts on this seem to keep saying, wow, this could take, a year and a half. And so as I was digesting all that, I kept thinking, we got to hunker down for the long haul, and we have to stay positive. And a few thoughts kept running through my brain when I'm thinking about my students, so much about how to continue to help keep my students' spirits high. And I kept thinking about this kind of uncanny optimism. And say what you will about America, but one of America's myths, or maybe qualities, has always been this notion that Americans have this uncanny optimism, that even in the face of the most dire circumstances, that Americans face that down. Now, this is not just specific to Americans. We know this, but it is part of our American mythos. And as we were facing these really tough times, I kept thinking about that uncanny optimism. And I kept thinking about that expression that's more universal and more global, this notion of an indomitable spirit, that no matter what comes at you, that the spirit is indomitable. And for those of you guys that maybe saw Rocky 3, probably none of you, but in Rocky 3, Rocky has to face down this really very tough boxer named Clubber Lang. And Clubber keeps just beating on Rocky, just boom, boom. And Rocky just keeps like popping back up and going, ain't so bad, ain't so bad. And I just keep thinking, I kept thinking about, what that is. What is that? How can we instill a sense of indomitable spirit, an invincible creative spirit? And then how can we do it not just in a way that talks about the things that inspire us? Because there's a lot of great creative work that's happening out there that we're seeing that is inspiring us at this time. And we're going to share some of that today. But also, what are the mechanisms? What are the distribution methods and marketing methods that are available at extraordinarily low cost for artists to have access to not just be able to make their art, but to be able to get it out there into the world? And YouTube, for me, is as representative of that as anything. And the combination of YouTube as a delivery mechanism for getting out inspirational art with the inspiring Angela Courtin made me think, well, this could be a pretty fun conversation to have with some students, mixed in with some short films and talking about what we love. And so with that, we're going to begin this conversation by first allowing Angela to share a little bit about herself. Of course, she is the head of global brand marketing at YouTube. And I'd like her to walk everybody through her career a little bit, but also just to share any introductory remarks that you might have, Angela. Let me yield the floor to you.
Thanks, Adam. I think that, it's been a great time to be at YouTube. I actually contemplated leaving YouTube in December. I was offered a job to leave and go take a sort of more senior role at another tech company. And I decided to stay because I really felt like the work that I would be doing in terms of shaping the future of YouTube would be really important. I had no idea that COVID would be, a thing that would sort of bookmark this chapter in our life forever. But I will say it was the smartest decision I made, because I do feel as though YouTube has always played a role in connecting people and providing information and connection and just comfort. And I think that in COVID, we have really seen that more acutely than at any other time in my career, in terms of purpose meeting sort of intention in such a beautiful way. And as a marketer, I don't think I've ever done more important work in my life. So I would say that, I think many of you probably wonder, like, what do I do with my career? And I would say, like, I've probably asked myself that question every 2 to 3 years. And if you look at my resume, it's a circuitous path through traditional and new media. And, every 2.5 years to 3 years, I'm jumping jobs and going to the next role. And usually that's been a fortunate sort of ascension through my sort of career. Every role seems to be a new title and a bigger paycheck and a bigger responsibility. But I'm about to celebrate 3 years at Google, which is a milestone for me in my career. And I would say that what makes me get up every day is a curiosity in terms of the questions we get to ask and how we answer them. And I think as I get older, my sort of my career is about how do I become the best version of my skill set and my experience, as well as just how do I continue to satisfy the the sort of the need for lifelong learning. And I think that I have, I think when you look at YouTube, it has been a platform that has clearly served an incredible need. 15 years ago, we launched YouTube as a platform, and I think about the transformation of media, social media, video. And I look today at all of the sort of traditional media folks who are using YouTube and using vlogging, sort of like straight to camera, as a way to continue to connect with people. You think about Jimmy Fallon and you think about John Krasinski and Some Good News. Like, our creative community have been doing this format, this creative adaptability, we call it, direct to camera, since the inception of YouTube. And now when we see traditional mainstream media talent leaning in, you smile and welcome them and sort of share best practices. But you also want to turn to your creative community and say, you guys have been doing this. We just hosted a live stream with Mr. Beast, and it was a rock, paper, scissors like tournament, because there are no sports. So we turned to sort of like the simplest version of competition. And what he was able to do with the people he did it with was just phenomenal. And you sort of compare that to having Andrea Bocelli perform at the Duomo in Milan, and you see sort of like the remarkable silence of Milan in a lockdown and what he was able to do and connect people all around the world. We had 27 million people tune in for a live stream. Think about that. Like, you don't see those numbers in TV anymore. But people just needed to feel connected and needed to feel present. And I think, we've been able to show up in ways that are changing the relationship between fan and artist, fan and celebrity, fan and creator, which is just an evolution of what we've been doing for the last 15 years. So, it's a remarkable time, full stop. And it's a remarkable time to demonstrate the power of YouTube.
Yeah, it definitely serves a really timely purpose right now. And that ability to do these huge, massive, inspirational scalings, right, is just something that didn't exist, especially when it's coming from people who were little known artists, prior. And we're going to be digging into some of those artists and some of their work. I really would like to give everybody a little bit of context. Can we do the 5 to 7 minute rundown of the career? How did you get from Oklahoma State to where you are today?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. You were on a path. It will lead you to where you're meant to be. For me, it started at Oklahoma State University. I transferred there from University of Texas. I did my MBA there. While I was at OSU, I created a business, which is basically, it was essentially like the halftime show. We did it every Friday night before the first home football game. I wrote a business plan. I got a $500,000 seed investment. I had my MBA paid for. I had an office and a 200-person staff while in college. I was inspired. I didn't come out when I was at OSU, as you can imagine why. It was not exactly the friendliest days for LGBT individuals. So I moved to DC right after I graduated from my MBA, and I wanted to get into politics. I felt like I could change the world, change opinion. And I became a finance director in a congressional race. I then moved to the DNC. I moved to Human Rights Campaign. I then came out to LA thinking that I really wanted to be in, the business. And I answered an ad in Variety magazine and became an assistant to an executive producer. So I restarted my career. I was trying to think how old I was, still in my late 20s, early 30s. And I worked my way up. I became an associate producer at HBO. I did Big Love and Carnival. And I realized that as much as I loved production, it wasn't fulfilling me in a way. Like I knew I was never going to be a director, a cinematographer. So there were limited paths for me in terms of really owning my own power and my desire to sort of do more. I immediately, went back to politics, worked for Rock the Vote. From there, met 3 influential people, one of which gave me my first job at MTV, which I worked as a temp. I just want you to know, I worked as a temporary contractor, not a full-time employee, early 30s. And I started the first integrated marketing department for MTV on the West Coast. I then was made full-time. I became a VP there. I started running the entire office. From there, the second person at Rock the Vote said, we need a CMO at MySpace. At the time, I had no idea what MySpace was. I sort of took the job. And within 3 days of being on the job, I was giving a keynote speech on the power of social media. Supposed to be an expert, clearly knew nothing. But that day, Obama, the Pope, and Paris Hilton all joined MySpace. So like it was the thing. And I always say to people, like, I faked it until I made it. And I don't think I really made it as a social media expert until probably year 2 at MySpace. By then, I took a job at a media agency, started running. I built an agency within an agency, was promoted to president, again, well before I was ready to be at that level of seniority. Faked it till I made it. Then from there, got poached by a client, became a CMO of a studio, not really prepared to be that either. From there, I went to Fox to be the CMO of Fox. And from there, I went to Google. So I would say half the time, I don't even think I'm qualified to be taking these jobs. I think I'm finally at a place in my career where I'm settling into and acknowledging that I am not an imposter. I'm actually a good marketer and have built good teams and really enjoy what I do on a daily basis. But that's my career. So by the way, I'm sure your parents or yourself, it's not exactly the swiftest path, but it worked for me. And and I would say just keep trying things. Like for me, I really felt as though I took advantage of every opportunity. And it wasn't, I've had to explain why I've only been at companies for 2 to 3 years. And I now have a story that makes sense and is, believable because it's true, which is, I continue to be curious. I take every opportunity, even when I'm not ready for it. And now I'm finally, like, as I tell Adam, like, I'm ready to settle down. Like, I love being at Google, and there are many ways in which I can have a long career that continues to evolve so that I'm never bored, which I think is what I fight against every day, if I'm being honest.
So let's talk a little bit about Google, YouTube, the mission that inspires you. ASU's got a really clearly defined mission. Its charter, which I probably said to you a good 24 times at this point. First sentence states that ASU as a university won't judge ourselves by how many people we exclude, but rather how many people we include. It measures ourselves based on, school measures itself based on the degree of positive social impact to the communities we serve. And it's inspiring. I never thought I would have been a company man, so to speak. I have become one because the mission is very clear and it's very inspiring. You're clearly interested in settling down, as you say, with Google and YouTube. How do you define the mission? What is it that's really inspiring with you about the brand, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, the two brands are very different. I think Google's brand is to be helpful. I mean, literally to be helpful. And I think that if you have ever used a Google product, you understand that it is all about how to connect you from the question you are asking or seeking to the answers wherever that is, or whatever device or product that may be. And for YouTube, I think this ability to, we talk about the four freedoms, which is the ability to connect, the ability to feel protected, the ability to make money. So if you're a creator and you want to have a second career or a first career, and just like our responsibility narrative to ensure that this creativity, this thing that we value that can show up in many ways, whether that's slime making or rainbow looming or politics or just laughter, like it all exists on YouTube. And so for me, when I think about the mission of YouTube and I see it every day, I feel a responsibility to show up as a marketer and connecting these messages and these creators and artists and public figures to communities. And whether those are micro communities, like I think about this idea that in Italy, there was a woman who discovered we call them pasta grannies, but they're women, older women, who literally carry the secrets of Italian pasta. And they will carry them to their grave if we do not sort of like codify and memorialize and then distribute these videos about how to make 83 different types of pasta. And I think about this woman who turned to YouTube to then distribute this content, and now all of these individuals, both young and old, are connecting to pasta grannies as a micro community to carry on the traditions of Italian pasta making. Like, think about that, or language or art or just history. And like, that's one element. And then, as Adam, you and I share videos, there's remarkable creativity that exists that enable us to feel less alone. Whether you are, a queer individual in Botswana, or whether you are, a female trying to get out of her circumstances, or just someone looking to laugh at a cat video, it all exists. And that's the beauty of YouTube. So every day can be a completely different turn of the kaleidoscope.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I never thought of YouTube as the mechanism through which our civilization is going to avoid a second dark ages. But maybe, right? We know what gets the most attention, right? My son certainly does, and enjoys his share of Mr. Beast and the others, right? And we know the people have had this extraordinary successes with massive numbers of followers. But I keep thinking about the other millions of artists and cultural keepers of the flame, like the people who are recording the pasta grandmothers, for instance. I think that's really exciting, and I can understand why that would be a mission that would motivate you. Before we dive in deep into this notion of the invincible creative spirit and share some videos, I want to ask one more question about your work. And this is really maybe just my own indulgence, because I have I don't know, pet peeve's not the right word for it. It's more just like a fascination with how what used to be called a company is now called a brand, and that what used to be called a logo, or really, or at least at some point in time, the notion of a brand and a logo were kind of similar. Like, at least when I was growing up, a brand was sort of the swoosh itself. In some point, that notion of brand sort of got changed to almost like an ethos, the entire idea, the mission of the company. And then somehow people started talking about companies, and they were using the term brand. How do you shake all those three things down? How do you define those three things?
Yeah, we talked about this I think at our last session together about, is YouTube a platform or is YouTube a brand? Um, I think that when you are a technology company and you are a platform enabling this type of connection and this type of creativity, and the proliferation of that creativity, I think that it's hard to sort of tease out what's the brand and what's the platform. And I say that because we are running a brand campaign now called #WithMe, and we've been using it to really encourage young people to heed the messages of whatever the moment of the curve is for the respective country. So we started with stay home with me, then at home with me, acknowledging that not everyone can stay home. Then we're now with get by with me. But the with me um, trend is something that's been on our platform for over 10 years, which is really taking this banal task of everyday living, whether that's brushing your teeth or cooking or studying or meditating, and doing it in a communal environment. So you can imagine this beautiful trend now becomes essential to survival during COVID. And we talk about, well, what is the role of YouTube? And I would argue that YouTube, while the play button is symbolic for, you immediately understand what YouTube is depending on your own experience with YouTube, right? So it's not what I tell you it is, it's the way you experience it. And my job as sort of leading brand marketing is to ensure that the way in which we show up is always in service of two communities: the user community, our users who show up every day, 2 billion every month, and the people who make the content. We do not make content. We make very little content through our originals sort of, shingle, but it is really about connecting the consumer with the creator, and that creator now is big C and little c. And so I really feel like there is the brand, if we focus too much on the brand, we get in the way of that relationship. And so my job as sort of brand marketing is simply to enable that relationship and know that in doing so, the platform is secure. It's making sure that we are protecting your rights as a consumer, that we are advocating for free information, that we are taking down misinformation, and that we are keeping the platform safe for everyone who comes on. And we are welcoming of all voices. And I may not personally agree with every voice or every opinion, but in order to have a free society, we must have the ability to have, open discourse.
Yeah, YouTube is the brand that allows everyone to express their own brand or their own sense of identity. Let's dive into some of this theme that we're looking at, this invincible creative spirit. But before we do that, and I want to just say to everybody, not just to Angela, as we all have become accustomed to in the Zoom life that we're living, because I'm doing the hosting here and a little bit of the tech directing. Barry, of course, is really doing the tech directing for me. I'm checking out questions. So whenever I'm looking down, you know what Google needs to invent? You heard it here first. Whoever invents a technology that can put the camera behind the screen so that we're always looking at each other, and somebody's gonna make a lot of money with that. And probably all it takes is a hologram. But I'm gonna look down here for a second because I see there is a question from Sedona. And Sedona, why don't you pop on and turn on your microphone and you can ask Angela your question.
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Hi, Angela. I'm Sedona. I actually originally met you in the Welcome to Hollywood class. And we talked about this a little bit at one point, but I kind of wondered, in terms of COVID-19, I wondered, what do you think are some really important steps that companies or like individuals should be taking during this time to either keep their brands like the way they are, or do you think that similarly it might be a good time to start kind of redefining brands now that everything like has moved online? Do you think that it's important for companies to establish that they're still here, they're still the same, or is it kind of more like, hey, we've adapted with this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, great to see you again. I think it's really interesting. I'm sure all of you as consumers are experiencing sort of the similar sort of questions that you're asking, Sedona, and that I'm asking myself too, which is, what is the role of certain companies? So I think about 2008. So, 12 years ago, when we had the financial crisis, what was born out of 2008 was the gig economy. So if you think about Uber and Grubhub and Airbnb and TaskRabbit, it was the ability for the individual to take control of his or her own career, right? Now, I think about that today, and I wonder how many of us would be comfortable having someone come in the house or give us a massage versus going to, a service or, delivering food. Now, some of those, I don't think all of those gig economy companies will survive, but I do think those that pivot to create a service that is in need, i.e., you think about Uber. Uber is probably going to buy Grubhub. When I know the gentleman who runs marketing, he's a former Googler. They were thinking about how to launch Uber Eats in a big way because people only knew Uber, but they were facing a lot of regulation and concerns about the way in which Uber was taking over the taxi industry, and they weren't able to pivot quickly. Pandemic comes, now drivers are delivery people. You're spending more time on Uber Eats. They're going to consolidate with Grubhub. And now you have a company that's about delivering meals during a pandemic when people can't go out. And you're not really interested in getting in a car right now. So I think evolving is a point of survival. Now, I would encourage all of you to read this article called Prune. Prune is a restaurant in the Lower East Side of New York. There was an article in the New York Times Magazine, which was all about the closing of Prune, which was this establishment that this woman, Gabrielle, ran for quite some.
Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, but Angela is frozen. Okay, let's just give Angela a moment. And I'm sure she'll realize what's going on. And at least I hope she realizes what's going on. I hope she didn't go 10 minutes in. Yeah, there she just went off. So she'll probably join us here in a second. And remember, everybody, that you're welcome to ask questions, and then we will get going here in a second.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Not a great ad for Chromebook, by the way.
Wait, say that one more time.
I was going to say, not exactly the best ad for Chromebooks. But so if you read this article, Prune, which I'll send to Adam, but it talks about the restaurant industry. And it's basically saying that all businesses that are shuttering now because of COVID were already on the bubble anyway. And it was about this idea of why we created intimate restaurants. Like, this was a crowded restaurant. They talk even about the fact they were so crowded that you could put your glass on a table and it would probably end up on your neighbor's table and you would be confused as to whose it was. But if you think about your own consumer habits, consumption habits, how many of you order in versus going out? How much money are you willing to spend on a restaurant? What do you require in terms of getting into a restaurant? This is a restaurant that did not take online reservations. It only did them hand and pencil. You had to wait in line. You would close down a restaurant because you would enjoy the atmosphere and the company so much. But the thing that I would say is that what I worry about with COVID and brands is that I worry that we're going to lose intimacy, because intimacy requires, in many ways, closeness and connection. And so what does a world post-COVID look like? I'm partnering with a cultural anthropologist to dive deeply into these questions. What happens if you don't go back to college and you only do it remotely? Most of you have been doing remote learning through ASU, so you're already ahead of the curve. But when we think about adulthood and the passage of adulthood from high school to college, most of that is about leaving home to go to college. What happens if we don't do that? What happens when we think about this idea of now we're having to get in our cars again because we don't have shared transportation. What does that mean for transportation? We think about YouTube. We think about artists not being able to perform when 70% of their income comes from actually performing in venues because they also sell merch. Do you feel the same about doing a live stream with an artist? Like, to me, what I love about these inflection points is they break everything, literally break everything. And then what comes back together is a whole new way of thinking about, one, the connection between the consumer and the brand. And then what does experience mean? And in a world where we can't have the physical experience, the IRL experience, what do the new companies that form out of this enable us to do to feel more connected? I mean, how many of you started dating during this time? How many of you have actually had to go online to think about dating and intimacy through digital environments? Like, think about Bumble. Bumble was a company that was enabling you to meet people in person. Now you're meeting on them online. Do you feel better? Do you feel worse? Do you feel more intimate, closer? So I try to take apart everything to see what comes back together and how those pieces will fit.
Cool. Excellent. Great question, Sedona. Thank you. I want to do a hard pivot into the heart of this theme, this invincible creative spirit, this indomitable spirit, this uncanny optimism. So I thought we would have this conversation by way of the modern days equivalent of LP sharing, which you're too young for, Angela. Everybody here is too young for, except for me, where you'd get together. I'm just barely old enough, and you'd go to a buddy's house and say, check out this album, dude. And you'd sit down and you would play the vinyl with the needle. I'm sure some of you guys know what I'm talking about because there's been about 6 or 7 kind of resurgences of traditional vinyl records. So we're going to do the modern equivalent of that. It's going to share a video, and then we're going to come back and we'll talk about it a little bit. So the way we're going to do that is I'm going to paste the link into the chat window of the Zoom chat, and my colleague Ben is going to send it to everybody in the comments section at the live stream. And we're all going to mute our mics and turn off our cameras while we watch this little clip. And as soon as you're done, come back to Zoom, turn on your camera, keep your mic muted. And when everybody's camera is on, we'll know that we're back and we'll have a little conversation. So I just sent everybody the link to a really wonderful 4-minute YouTube video, and I hope you enjoy it. And I'll see you in a couple minutes. Everybody's almost back. If you are back and don't have your camera on, either turn your camera on or shoot me a quick chat in the Zoom chat and just say here or back, and we'll get started here. Great, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Emil. So I think I want to start this. I certainly have thoughts and prompt questions for Angela. I would be delighted if one student were to go, Collis, that is the corniest thing I've ever seen. Like, really? You just showed that? Like, I really want to know what you guys think of this, honestly and authentically. Let's have a conversation. Would anybody like to chime in, start the dialogue? Yeah, Amber. Yep.
I thought it was really good, and it was kind of like really powerful too. And I love how it was presented like kind of like a children's bedtime story. Stuff like that. And it does kind of make the whole situation a little bit better. Because things need, because it brings off this idea that things need to get worse before they get better. So
yeah, it offers hope, right?
mm-hmm.
It offers a narrative with an end date that's some indefinite time in the future, and at a place where a dad and their kid can kind of look back at this crazy time. You know, that's one thing that great art does. Who else has a question? Yes, Marcus.
It's not really a question, but I kind of just wanted to chime in, kind of go off of what Amber said. It does make you feel better, as you mentioned, Adam. It gives you that end date. But also I felt like it addressed a lot of questions that I have yet to be answered. And Angela even touched on this. What is human life going to be after COVID-19 is over, or when COVID-19 is over? So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. You know, it's interesting too, because the way in which it's shot, which probably was mostly a function of trying to make the production simple and inexpensive. He's so tight, right? I think what it's supposed to allude to, I think, is that life is returned to normal, and he's just sitting up against the bed while he's trying to put his kid to sleep. But it's a very tight composition. And for those of you guys in my directing class who have taken it, you can have your own thoughts about what that tight composition might infer, right? It doesn't necessarily infer like, oh, wow, it's now a big sigh of breath and, oh, yeah, and we're, you know, in a, you know, big, expansive, open and free place now. That said, I don't think that was the intent. I think it was more that, oh, that things were back to normal and there was breathing room and he was just trying to put the kid to sleep. One of the things that I love about this poet, who I believe is from New Zealand, is he's not a bad actor, right? When he gets tired and he kind of puts his eye in, and he's a pretty good actor. Any other students before we pass it to Angela? And how about all the way from England, Amy Cable? Thoughts?
I think that he was actually English.
I think he lives in London, but I think he's from New Zealand. Was
Okay.
my research, thanks to Google, it got me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I like the shout out to where he said we were all clapping, because I know most countries are going out once a week and clapping for, you know, the people that are on the front lines for us. I think it really put it into perspective, things that you didn't really think of, like the pollution. Like, you wouldn't really think about that when a lot of people are, you know, being affected by it. It's nice to see it in that glass half full perspective, that, you know, we've had wars, we've had other things, but we've come out of it in a better way because of it. And I think it was a really nice way of saying, like, it's going to be tough right now, but we're going to come out stronger. You know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to learn some things. We're going to have this great realization certainly offers that possibility, right, to people. And this video, made by somebody who only had, I think, 4 YouTube videos of this poet who goes by probably tomfoolery, now has over 5.6 million views. It reached a lot of celebrities in our town, and that got reposted. Angela, how did it hit you?
I think that what I've loved about this video, and maybe what Amy was saying rings true, is that I think we all need to look for purpose. Like, why does this happen? What are we supposed to learn from it? Is it an opportunity to reset? What are the things? I do a dinner once a week and 3 breakfasts once a week with my team. You can sign up for it, these virtual breakfasts. And I end every conversation with one question, which is, what will you do and who will you see first when this is all over? And it's interesting to me because when I ask that question, what I want to understand is, what did we learn and who do we miss the most in terms of the physical connection? And resoundingly, what most people will say, and I think what this video is alluding to, is that connecting, like, there's so much that we learned through this. I myself found myself on a Saturday having time. I never have time on a Saturday. I'm always moving from one activity. I have 2 children to another, thinking about how productive I can be because I've been working all week. And this idea of slowing down to really listen and feel and experience life is such a blessing. And I never would have given it to myself. I would have never felt like I had permission to do it, that society gave me permission, that the sort of treadmill I was on was ever going to slow down until I retired, which is too long. So I think what I love most about this video is that it put it into a children's story. And I think that device was really important because as an adult, what we know is that we take the lessons that we learn, the really simple lessons that we learn in childhood. We don't ever really listen to them or really internalize them as adults. If it was a fictionalized story that we read or that someone had recommended, but there's something about the childlike quality of wonder and belief that anything is possible, that device made me feel like I do want to call it the great realization. And what is it that we realize? And that will be individual for everyone. And some of it will be common and some of it will be unique, but that we will have this inflection point that all things from here on out will be measured against. Like, what did we do from this point on? And I'm actually reading a book called The Great Plague, which is about the 1918 Spanish flu, which actually started in Haskell, Kansas. But it's about what we learned in the last 100 years and how medicine and politics and society sort of evolved from that point. And while I won't be old enough to know how much has changed from this moment, many of you on this call will. And I wonder, will we actually have slowed down? Will the oceans have calmed? Will travel curb? Will pollution recede? Will politics soften? Will lines sort of like blur? I don't know, but I'm hopeful that there will be good things coming out of this and that we'll realize that our consumerism has caused so much of this. So what will we be willing to give up in order to keep from this experience?
I really appreciated all of that, particularly what you said about, what is the purpose that you draw from these events? What is the meaning that you draw from these events? And that, depending on your religious, philosophical point of view, that purpose or meaning either gets presented to you, right? Or it is a creative act. And even if you believe that it's getting presented to you, there still is the undeniable reality that you're ingesting your experiences and then coming up with the purpose that you discern. from the experiences. And this is what I mean when we talk about this indomitable spirit, this invincible spirit. But what precedes that, again, is this kind of uncanny optimism to say, you know, even though it seems so dire, I'll you know, listen, it was funny because I was starting to share this earlier when I talked about, like, we've been hit by this cavalcade of difficulties personally, that honestly, you know, nobody in my family was touched by this or the other until this week. And a person younger than me passed away who was a dear friend. And it really took the wind out of my sails. It knocked me back good, like really hard. And I don't know that if it was COVID, and I'm not sure what the cause of death was. It was a young person who was a true dream partner of mine, a person who basically always had the time to imagine with me when it was necessary. And how do people, in the face of those sorts of difficulties, I'm finding that it was very challenging for the first few days, but in his memory, I feel that spirit ginning me up, right? And in the midst of this worldwide, you know, we're talking about 100,000 people in the US alone. They're saying now, you know, what do we do to keep drawing from that well? And I'm asking this in a rhetorical way, and I'm really trying to fire people up to remember that that well exists, and it's embodied by this probably tomfoolery, right? It's embodied by the kid at the end of the short, which might be the most wonderful part of the whole piece, right? Who's just thinking nothing but, you know, it's all going to be great, right? And we just have to keep trying to find that well and to draw from it. And I want to show you everybody a very different video that I think draws from that well, but at a different time. It was a time of abundance, a time of a lot more shenanigans and some more mirthful tomfoolery. Back in 2017, when a couple filmmakers, Casey Neistat and Max Joseph, who happened to be one of my students, not at ASU, but at UCLA Extension, they made a video that inspired a lot of people. And I think very much embodies what is possible with YouTube. And it's a video called Do What You Can't. Probably many of you have seen it. I'm now sending it off. Ben, I'm going to text it to you. If you could pass it to the folks on the YouTube live stream. And let's take a look at this, you know, from a different time, of course, 3 years ago. And after you're done with it, make sure to mute your microphones and then come back, turn on your cameras, and we'll have a conversation about this. And also maybe a little bit more about the great realization. See you in a couple. Okay. We got a bunch of people back. If you're not turning your camera on, turn it on. And this one, I'm going to throw right to Angela. What'd you think of that? You seen it maybe once or twice?
I've seen it once or twice. It's a beautiful video. Like every time I see it, and I haven't seen it in a while, to be honest, every time I see it, I don't know, like I have this heart bursting like feeling about YouTube. And I say that even though I work for it, but it's just completely independent. Like I think about joy. Like I just think about joy. And sometimes it's so interesting. We've been focused on our campaign about what's next and whether or not it's time to talk about joy. Are we ready to have joy in our lives? Are we ready to pivot a bit to accept that? And I think the thing that I have loved most about the number of videos that are being created by I call it the long tail of creators, are really about levity and about failure and about acknowledging like the sourdough bread doesn't rise, the yoga doesn't feel perfect, working at home sucks. And like literally, guys, I was on a GVC, which is a Google video conference hangout on Friday, my last meeting of the day. I'm on a call with some very senior folks at Google, and somebody's partner walks out of the room naked in the background. And like, I had this moment, I was like, oh my God, did I just see that? And like, I realized I did, and it's okay because this shit happens. And this is like what working from home is like, and I'm sure studying from home. And so what I love about that video is that if it's possible to dream it, and possible to do it, and possible to film it, it will exist on YouTube. And that is the beauty of our creative community and the indomitable spirit, Adam, as you've been texting me, in terms of just people's ability to wake up every day and just try things you've never done, share that experience, the failure and the success with people. And I'm proud to be a part of YouTube with a video like that and a creative community like that.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's time for joy. I think it's time for a shock and awe of joy, the likes of which the world has never seen. And that's going to come from you guys, the students. It's going to come from the people watching this on the live stream. We need to have a full force infusion of deep joy essence in a massive global scale, which is now completely imaginable and possible because the mechanisms are there to do it. So we need to have the content. I hate that word, right? But we got to have the art to pipe through the pipes and to utilize the marketing mechanisms of Google and YouTube so that people can get what they need, which is the truth and the joy. We don't have a lot more time with Angela, so I want to see, Ben, is there a particular question that we want to get up here? Because there's one last video I want to show, and we've only got like 3 minutes. So a really quick question on this particular video or a comment on this video.
There is one from YouTube from Lindsay Lambert. Angela, how do you balance ambitious creativity with making smart business decisions?
Usually not very well. I will tell you that I tend to privilege the creative pursuit over the right business decision, but it always ends up being the right one in the end. We have made 5 videos in 8 weeks, hero anthems, we call them. We have pushed people to the brink of their capability, their capacity. And I tell the team each time I ask them for a new anthem that the reason that we exist, the reason that YouTube exists, is that we base everything we do on what others are doing. There is not a single unique idea that I have, you guys. Like the truth about being a marketer at YouTube is that the platform itself will reveal what we need to say and how we say it. Because we have really, when I became the brand marketer at YouTube, I said, We will only do marketing that is based on what other people are telling us they are most interested in, because they are more interesting than we are. And so everything that we put out is based on a trend, on a data point, on a real action that people are taking in terms of utilizing the platform to get by every day. So like, that's where I feel like in terms of business decisions, it's ended up being the best business decision we've ever made in terms of how we are showing up in COVID, because we are basically saying that where people are turning to find ways to cut their hair, to groom their dog, to bake sourdough, to grow a garden, to raise chickens, to understand how to find informative content that is authoritative and useful, is on YouTube. It's not because we create it, it's because we are socializing it and we are distributing it and we are elevating those voices from the micro influencer to the macro ones.
You know what? Everybody turn your microphones on, my friends. Everybody turn those mics on, get your cameras on. I think that's just a perfect note to end. We're gonna stay on, students. I got one more video I want to show you, but I know Angela needs to go. And I just think that's such a perfect, inspiring note to end on. So give me a big help expressing our appreciation. Round of applause, some thank yous. Don't be shy about saying thank you.
Thank you guys.
you.
This has
Thank
been fun. This has been great. And Adam, thank you for reaching out. I always enjoy this hour of time together.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. And we're going to be coming at you with some inspiring joy, okay?
I love it. You guys stay safe, stay sane, stay indoors if you can.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, Angela. Thanks. So, students, first of all, let me open the floor to anybody that has comments or thoughts about that last video. There's one more that I wanted to share with you guys. There's a lot of inspiring videos on YouTube, and you guys are now a cohort. For those watching on YouTube, the students here on the Zoom are part of a film and TV career boot camp. It's part of their academic program at Arizona State University, part of the new School of Film that is just now starting to be established. And we're all very excited about, but we have students also from the journalism school, the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, and a variety of other schools within Arizona State University, which you may not know, but is ranked as the most innovative school in the country the last 5 years in a row, above MIT and Stanford, right there in the desert of Arizona. But we're gonna show you one more video, but I'd love to hear any thoughts that the boot camp students, did you guys dig that video? Is it like so old? Am I dating myself? Be honest and real with me, and I'll be honest and real with you. Marcus.
I'm first of all, I'm laughing at the comment that you said dating yourself, because everything that Angela said about getting her start in MySpace from 2008 and then YouTube on up, I was a part of that. So in this video, I saw a lot of old creators that were on YouTube, or I won't even call them old, but like YouTube has shifted. And it was just refreshing taking that step back from what they thought. It's hard to explain, actually. It was very positive, and it was kind of like me taking a step back into my old viewing habits, and seeing where those people are today and seeing what they've done. And it was a refreshing take.
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought I can't say for sure, right? But it almost felt like you were on the cusp of saying something about that video, and where I thought you were going to go with it is almost like the promise of what that video made for creators in a way. And
yeah, especially with like people like Liza Koshy. Her very first, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, her very first video was in that montage, and then she ended up interviewing the president. So if Liza can do it, then someone else can as well. It's just like, it gives us the idea that the possibilities are endless. And that's kind of what I took from it and what I'm going to run with.
That's
So,
awesome. Very interested in hearing from others. You know, the one thing I'll say, and just raise your hand or raise it, you know, in the participants window if you'd like to make a comment. I did want to share, you know, I keep thinking about YouTube, this worldwide distribution platform that is effectively free, which has, at a minimum, lower cost marketing mechanisms that, if they do what they say they do, allows you to find, as Angela calls it, these micro communities. So if you're able to make a movie that can tap into a micro community, at least theoretically, should be the case that as filmmakers are trying to build their careers in Hollywood, for instance, you know, that they are actively still being creative and building their audience and practicing their filmmaking. And this is certainly happening in certain arenas with like YouTube stars that are now getting opportunities to be actors in Hollywood. I know that the controversial Logan Paul I'm seeing a lot of promotion around the remake of Valley Girl, and apparently he has a role in it, and he's leveraging his YouTube stardom to make inroads into Hollywood. It just strikes me that the inroads are unlimited, and we've certainly seen instances of clever filmmakers make really great shorts with visual effects and then get hired to do studio features or things of that nature. To me, that represents an incredible opportunity for this indomitable creative spirit to thrive and actually help you on a business level, entrepreneurial level, to build that audience. Would love to hear from any of you. Or you got, okay, let's see. Yes, Allery, and then Pallavi. Allery, you go first, please.
So pretty much I had a question that I was gonna ask her, which was aside from like researching about your craft and learning like from it, like on, you know, either YouTube or whatever else, like what would you suggest creatives to do during this pandemic? And I think that my question almost got answered by that video because it's like you don't need a big crew, like you don't need cranes, you don't need a big crew, you don't need all these things that were traditionally thought of to make a film. And you can honestly just do it on your own and upload it to YouTube. And I think that even though it might not get a ton of views, you are also like working on your craft, or maybe it might get the right viewer and it might lead you somewhere else. So I think that it was, even though I didn't get my question answered from her, which I'll probably ask later on this week, I still almost got it answered from that video. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, that's great. And you know, the thing is that the YouTubers that get all the attention are the ones like Mr. Beast that are getting these millions and millions of views. And you might not be familiar with the term, but if you guys might remember, Angela talked about the long tail of creators, right? And some of you will be familiar with that. If you're an MBA, you're probably very familiar with that. But the idea of the long tail is that there's this, if you think about it as a graph, right? Think about it as, you know, number of viewers, right, on this axis, on the y-axis, and on the x-axis is the actual, say, YouTubers, right? So somebody like Mr. Beast is going to have a huge number of viewers, right? And then as you go along the x-axis, that's going to then have this very, very long tail, right? What I'm really curious about are the people in between, right? Where it's very high, right? Like, let's forget about the first 300 biggest YouTubers, right? But I'm interested in 301 to like 600, right? And if that space, or, you know, maybe it needs to even shift down because there's millions of people uploading videos to YouTube. And I keep thinking maybe that space can be inhabited by really creative filmmakers that are doing the kinds of stuff that Casey and Max did. And maybe they exist in ways that, you know, that I'm even not aware of, as, you know, an old fuddy-duddy who was just doing basic Google research to pull up videos. And I know that Vimeo is a destination where a lot of very creative filmmaking is going on. But I just think regardless of where it's living right now, there's an exceptional opportunity for artists to maintain creative autonomy while actually generating maybe, for instance, enough living so that maybe you don't have to do the waiting job, or you're not having to drive the Uber car, and maybe it can generate enough to where you can keep doing your work and keep honing and refining your craft. Pallavi, I saw you had a question, please.
Yes, Adam, thank you. This video spoke to me for something that people have been doing these days, which is creating for free and for fun. You know, with the pandemic, you've seen everybody's creating. You know, people are making food dishes and they're talking about their kids, and some of it's really interesting. You know, a husband and wife are suddenly doing a skit and, you know, sharing it on Facebook. I think it, a lot of these YouTubers made a lot of money, but when they started creating, they were just creating for free and for fun, and it's because of what they do. And eventually, you know, YouTube does give you the ability to get connected and to make money. And like she said, you know, what those were one of their values. But it all starts with just, if you're doing it for fun and if you're doing it for free, then it's probably something that you really enjoy. And I think the pandemic speaks to that because that's what people have been doing. And it also speaks to people being a little more vulnerable and not embarrassed to create. Because with everyone stuck at home, it's like all these people have sprung up and started creating, and they're like, oh, well, if my neighbor is doing it, why can't I do it? You know, and now they're creating, and then they're like, oh, but grandma's doing it, why can't I do it? Whereas earlier it was like, oh, you know, creating is only for the creators. But it's and that's why it takes me back to that point that she made where she said it's a really good time to be at YouTube.
Yeah, for sure. And it's awesome that it democratizes content, right? But I also want to flip that a little bit and think about the fact that we're actually talking to film students, to art school students, right? That you guys aren't the average person necessarily, right? Who just, why don't I video myself making pancakes for my kids because it's a really funny moment and we can put it on YouTube. I think that is awesome. I think that is great. What I'm wanting to encourage you guys is, if you're feeling something that you're passionate about, whether it's a joy-filled expression of what you're feeling, or it's facing down some very pertinent, important issue that the world needs to deal with, whatever it is that is beating in your heart, that is important, that is, as Bob Dylan said once, is trapped on your tongue, right? It's this idea that's trapped on your tongue and you just have to bridge the gap and get it out there. I really want to get film students thinking about how to leverage these platforms. And I don't think that right now that I, as a film professor, have done a good enough job of encouraging leveraging these platforms, really learning how they work and how much reach you have, and how to utilize their marketing systems to help you get your special message out to the people that are waiting out there to hear from you. And I believe that they are. And I think we need to be thinking about these systems like YouTube and even Vimeo, and there are plenty of other online ways that you can get your art into the world. I wanted to share one last video that is very COVID related, but also, Ben, were there any other questions either from the class or from YouTube that we should touch on before going to the next video?
There was one more on YouTube from Michael Wingis. Angela, can executives tell if a video channel will go viral? Like a general sense of success.
Yeah, and my apologies that Angela is not here to answer that question. And if you can send your email, just put it in the comments. I can try to get that answered for you, and we can. We'll just share that out with the class. And that's a really great question. I would have to imagine that there might be some analytics that that YouTube is able to do to sort of sense like, oh wow, this is starting to trend, for instance. And who would know though? I would suspect that that they would not be able to tell from inception. It's very similar to the feature film business. You know, there's I'll just share very briefly in the research that I did on independent film finance, the focus on risk reward profiles for investments in independent films. What I discovered was that you have a lot of producers out there that, you know, for decades, is it's in the beginning of Hollywood. You know, they might, if they were ethical at all, tell their investors, boy, this is a really high risk. You know, the odds of success are really, really low. But the odds of success are even lower than that. In fact, the ability, according to the statistical studies, if you believe in things like math and statistics, then you have to reckon with the reality that the ability to predict box office success is literally impossible from a statistical point of view. Now, the study that I'm using as my source, I believe, was a 2004 study. So with the advent of particularly Marvel and Star Wars, it may be that things have actually shifted and someone has been able to create an algorithm. But at least for the large history of Hollywood, there was no set of factors, just like you can predict the weather to varying degrees of certainty based on different factors environmentally. There were no set of factors that could predict box office success. There's too many variables that were too volatile and would skew any statistical analysis. My guess is that that's a very similar scenario, that it would take the initial, just like it would take the initial box office results to allow a statistician to predict ultimate revenue earnings in things like what used to be DVDs and VHS, and now in areas like VOD and AVOD and TVOD. Once you start to see the market responding, then you can make some predictions. But before the market begins to respond, I would suspect that YouTube is just the same as independent films, which is that there's no way to gauge or predict or find the perfect formula for what's going to succeed and what's not going to succeed. Ben, any other questions before we share this final video? Or would anyone like to throw on up there? Thank you. Pallavi is complimenting my excellent lighting today. Well, it's golden hour. The sun is coming down. Of course, I have this virtual background behind me. Okay, so why don't we share this one last video, which is very of our times that we're living in right now. We'll turn off our cameras, mute our microphones, and then return in just about 4 minutes. Okay, we'll wait a minute or two for everyone to get back. Shiloh, are you in Arizona?
Yeah,
Cool.
it's easier to study for the bar here than California.
I have heard. I've heard the
Yeah.
California bar is extremely challenging. That's what my friends tell me.
Well, I'm taking the California bar, but studying for it here is easier
Oh,
because of all the bigger closures in California
I understand.
compared to Arizona.
That's right.
It's easier. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I know you're interested in entertainment law. So naturally, yeah, you're going to need to pass that California bar.
Yes.
Cool. Good. Okay, everybody's almost back. We'll wait just one more minute for Amy. I think we're all back now. Excellent. Now, this is obviously an interpretation of a song. And I wanted to share it because part of what we did today was we shared this Zoom conference with the students from the Herberger Institute of Design and the Arts. And our hope was to inspire students everywhere from design students to art school students to music students, that even they can find ways to leverage the platform of YouTube to get their art out as this wonderful Berklee School of Music student did, Shelby Rassler, who produced, arranged, and edited this rendition of Burt Bacharach's and Hal David's classic, What the World Needs Now, with her friends at the Virtual Orchestra. And I just thought it was a really great use of the medium and of the something similar to the Zoom medium, even though I don't know if it was done live via Zoom. Obviously, not all of the editing was done live. But I sure would love to, just like at the, the old LP days, what'd you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. I know Julie's not gonna leave me hanging like this. I said, I know Julie's not gonna leave me hanging like this. Tell me, Julie, what did you think of this? Be honest.
I don't really have strong feelings about it one way or the other. Like, I mean, it was nice. I think it's a cool experiment, and I like the sentiment a lot. Beyond that, I don't have any strong opinions. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. That's what I was looking for. You be real with me, and I'll be real with you. And not every piece of art's going to hit everybody in the same way. And yeah, Moses.
Hi. I was going to say I think it's really, really amazing to basically see how people are able to still share their talent and still connect on YouTube, on social media and whatnot. And I think it's really, really cool that they're able to find ways to sort of still do it together. You would think you only see one person singing, but it's a whole bunch of people coming together to create one piece, which I think it's really, really cool. So yeah, you would sort of seem the whole world would be completely separate, but it's actually the opposite. The whole sort of entire world is somewhere or another is still sort of together and coming together. If that's by creating music, creating sharing their talent online or things like that, I think it's still really cool. So
Mariah, I saw, is your hand up related to this one?
Yeah, I feel like out of the 3 videos that we watched, the common denominator was the music, and the music pushing forward whatever the video was trying to convey. So I feel like with the first, with the storytelling one, and then with the kind of more motivational one, the music was, it enhanced the storytelling and tried to bring out some kind of emotive response with what the content was. And I feel like this one as well was the same thing. This is like more about community and kind of like building into a crescendo of just like the more and more people coming together throughout the video. So I think that's kind of like just as storytellers, not neglecting the power of having music to further solidify what you're trying to say with the story that you're telling.
Yeah, so critical, right? The music. And I appreciated what you said about just the pure filmmaking craft of it, which, as we've discussed in directing class, if your piece is increasing in intensity over time, right, then your visual design has to be increasing in intensity. And they did that in a really simple way, which was to simply introduce more and more and more and more people as the piece got more intense. You know, taste is a funny thing. You know, it's like different strokes for different folks, as they say. And you know, my taste tends to be pretty saccharine to some people's point of view. But thank you for that insight. And then I saw that Amy had her hand up from London. Amy, did you want to share with us?
Yeah, I just thought it was really creative of that one student to think it up and come up with it. And I'm not sure if it came out before Disney's sing-along. I know Disney Plus released like a sing-along, and they did a similar thing with all kinds of artists from Broadway or from the original films and things. And it's a lot like that. And I thought that was just, it was very different, and it's a completely new way of releasing media from all around the world. And I think it might impact creative content that comes out in the future.
Yeah, and then most recently, I have not seen the piece, but I've been told that All Rise, I believe that's the name of the television show, and I hope you'll forgive me for not knowing it, but they've done something similarly very creative, and it might be something just to have on your radar to look for. Let's see. Oh, Marcus has a comment. Why don't we do Pallavi and then Marcus?
Yeah, I wanted to make a quick comment that following SNL's lead, and I'm sure other people did it before, but they've been doing all their programming with all their artists at home. And you could be a producer, even if you're creating, you could be a director, even if you're creating from home with separate entities creating different pieces. You could even get a green screen, and and you could do all your direction, how close you want the audience to be, where you want people to look, how you want them to emote. You could be a director and producer. Of course, we all hope that things are going to get normal soon and we're going to be outside creating. But in the meantime, there's a lot of opportunities to create a short film sitting at home. I just wanted to point that out.
Yes, and what we're talking about is the very low budget version of trying to be creative. On the other end of the spectrum, FilmSpark just had an incredible company, the CEO of the Third Floor, come and visit our class, Welcome to Hollywood. And you might want to do a Google search for the Third Floor, and then look up, just do the Google search, the Third Floor virtual production. And this represents very much the high-end version of virtual production, but might signal to you the future of how productions may be managed in the future to try to reduce the possibilities of contagion. So that might be worth checking out. It's the Third Floor, and then you would also look up virtual production. But today's class or today's conversation really about, again, what can we do with the means that we have at our disposal to take the inspiring art that we hope to make and to get it out there. You know, that video that we just watched, 2 million views in 2 months. And they know that there are countless other examples of videos that blow up and get these incredible numbers of views. And again, where I want to get everybody thinking is, how can I leverage these platforms in a regular and routinized way to generate some income, to allow me to continue to practice my craft, to build my audience as I'm trying to pursue my greater dream of maybe making feature films or television. Or maybe there's some of you for whom the dream is, I want to be an artist who strictly makes videos on Quibi and YouTube and various other platforms like Vimeo and live that life and maintain total creative control over everything that I do. That's very desirable. Let's see, I don't think there's any other hands up. Barry, or rather Ben, are any other YouTube questions?
No more YouTube questions at this time.
Okay. Well, isn't Angela awesome? I hope you guys enjoyed that. I think she's really special. And I'll just open the floor to any questions, and then I'll make a couple of final remarks and also check in with Barry to see if there's anything he needs to discuss with you. So first to the students, and even throwing it out to YouTube, if you have any final questions or comments, please, especially if it relates to this indomitable creative spirit. I hope at a minimum you guys take away that possibility that at the end of the day, that's, in my opinion, that's where great art comes from, is an invincible creative spirit, an uncanny level of optimism that, who knows where it comes from, that has transcended all cultures in all times, that when faced with unimaginable challenges, somehow something pierces through, and somehow artists are able to find the stamina and the creativity and the whimsy and the delight and the provocative instinct and the subversive impulse. All those things that drive artists to do what they do, somehow they do it. And that now you have the tools to not only create that, but to get it out there. So I hope it's left you with just a little bit of that as a possibility. Any other comments? You guys got a big week ahead of you. Before throwing it to Barry, I just say, I really hope you'll embrace the idea of the seed bed. I hope you'll put your all, this is a boot camp, so it's going to be a real workout this week. I know that it's going to be fun. You're going to meet a lot of great people. Really be specific with them, be real with them. This is a place where you are totally safe to make mistakes. So you should go for it. This isn't the place to think like, oh, I'm going to pitch my idea and it's going to get picked up by one of these people that I'm going to meet. I would assume that it's not going to be picked up by one of these people you're going to meet. And I think you should just go for it, because this is one of the very few opportunities with these 18 people and plus your 3 instructors, where you're going to get the opportunity to really fall on your face and have no harm come from that. In fact, not only will there be no harm, there will be a benefit from it, because they'll tell you and they'll be real with you and honest with you in a gentle and supportive way.
Hey, Adam.
So don't worry about trying to make that big first impression. Yes, and so I guess I'm going to now shut my very long-winded mouth and pass it.
So before we turn off the YouTube feed, there's one final question from Maggie Frace.
Maggie!
Asking if you think there'll be another Sun Devils in Hollywood event later this year.
Maggie, I'm so glad to hear from you. Now, Maggie is someone who is a former student, who is the embodiment of a professional development skill that I want everybody to learn from now. And that is polite persistence. Maggie, you have embodied polite persistence as much as any student that I know, as you have tried to make relationships and made relationships with people professionally. Maggie is also one who has figured out how to finance her career by working for the Disney company as she continues to pursue her dream as a writer. The answer to your question, and thank you so much for chiming in, Maggie, is that if the quarantine ends, there will be Hollywood Sun Devil mixers. If in no other way, in the future, we would do a virtual happy hour. Now, Barry, if you can help answer this question, for this particular boot camp, in our final networking session, that's just between the 18 guests and the students. Is that correct?
That is correct. So there's no virtual mixer or in-person mixer for this event for the boot camp that's currently going on in session, but we will be broadcasting the guest panel as we will be doing the other guest panels on Tuesday and Thursday, which is open to the public and ASU students worldwide.
That's right. And if you don't have, it will be at the same YouTube channel that you're at now. And the information is at our social media sites, Facebook and Instagram and whatnot, also on our website, or you can always email us at asufilmspark@gmail.com to get information. But there's going to be actually 3 panels this coming week that relate to professional development. And the first panel is specifically on how does one present themselves professionally, and it's called The Business of You. The second panel, which is going to be, the first one's on Tuesday, the second one is on Thursday, and that's about how do you pitch your ideas with 6 entirely new industry professionals talking about how to pitch. And then on Saturday, there'll be a third panel, which is going to be with 6 new industry professionals, all talking about how do you build your professional network in a way that builds really meaningful relationships over time, that is a network that is built to last. And all ASU students and alumni are invited to watch the live stream of those panels and can ask questions through the comments window on the YouTube live stream. So I think that about covers it. Ben, Barry, Jen, anything else that we need to touch base on? Any final questions, students?
No, I think we're good. Students that are on this Zoom call with us have had a long day as it is, and they have a long day ahead of them tomorrow. So I think we should just wrap it up and welcome everyone on YouTube to join us Tuesday at 12:30 Pacific time and Arizona time. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to stop the feed now, if that's okay with you, Adam.
Awesome, everybody. Stay positive and have a great one. See you soon.
Thanks. Good show, Adam.
Hey, well, thank you very much, Jen. Bye, everybody.